fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you afterwards. It's all right.
Okay. Have we got a recording?
Everything's been recorded on that as well. So I'm going to process the video from that, make it sound better, give it to you guys to put on your YouTube channel.
We did with the pack.
Yeah.
Have a good day. Yeah, I found out one of the sessions because it was my work session. Yeah, it's one of those things. I think a lot of people just can't get it anyway. So something interesting. It's good to he's brilliant. I'll get around to this.
We've got Rosie from Body Swaps here today. Rosie's been doing a breakout session.
Memorised it, maybe. So you've got panel discussion and then extended the
Yeah.
discussion.
So,
Because what hardcore people
yeah, I think we won't have enough time to cover it. So, just to say, if anyone wants to continue
oh, it's a Q&A.
come back after the break.
And that's the way.
So, in the main discussion, we're going to do questions. And then when the panel discussion is raised, then we answer the questions. But then it was a wider discussion.
I know you said this the other day, you were like,
What's going to be the next step?
I'll go India.
It's just weird because I think we've grown up just expecting to know, especially when you get stuff. And it just seems to me like always think they're going to win.
It's like highest learning. With all of the
I
last
just
5
feel like
years.
they're inducted as well. I also feel like they're enjoying it.
I noticed a pattern. When it's a fight, Tesla, they'll actually, in the first one, completely collections everywhere. And then they, amazingly, within the third, it just doesn't seem to have any consistency. It's just saying that Anderson's doing really well in T20. He got something like 3 for 14 the other day.
So thank you for participating so enthusiastically this morning. I've had loads of great feedback on the breakout sessions from the audience and from the people who are running them, saying how much they enjoyed delivering them and how much you all enjoyed them. So I really appreciate that. I hope you've had a good lunch and a catch up with old and new colleagues. We're going to start our first session of the afternoon with a speaker, Dan Walden, who is from Kent Native.
Thank you everyone. And I think also all the speakers this morning were brilliant as well. And I really enjoyed running one of the workshops today, and some of the feedback from everyone, just the participation stage has been really great, so thank you. Tech Native, we do lots of stuff. Our ambition is to close the digital and tech skills gap, so we do all sorts of different things to do that. We are launching a whole range of boot camps in September, software development, data, AI video, artificial intelligence business, all sorts of different stuff. I also have a second hat that I wear where I'm the digital and creative skills lead for the Sussex Local Skills Improvement Plan. But that has led me to talk to over hundreds of employers, not just in digital actually, or creative, but also land-based and visitor economy, and digital skills across everything. And it's so clear that digital skills are going to be the central skills for the future that we're going to need. So I wanted to give you a bit of insight into not just what I've heard, but also where the direction of travel we're going, and some of the information that's coming out in the reports that's coming out now. The first thing I think that came out of a lot of my discussions with employers is that the digital skills that people come into the workforce now are not the skills that they need. And that's a tough message for us in FE, that what can we do differently? How can we give people the skills that they need? But it's backed up by reports. So this Future Now report, 52% of adults are lacking the digital skills needed in work, and 80% of employers expect everyone to have all of those skills. So there's a real gap between what employers want and actually what the skills that actually we've got to work for. So we need to change something. You can look at that, if everyone closes that skills gap, there's going to be a 10.3 billion earnings uplift. But you can also look at it that we're losing 10.3 billion pound of earnings because our workforce haven't got the right skills. So the businesses are losing 8.5 billion in potential profit because the workforce hasn't got the right skills. So it's upon us in the education sector to change things. And in Sussex, the digital is the third largest job sector, yet employers are still struggling to find candidates to fill the roles. So this these skills, apologies for the information over slides, these are very simple. To you, these are the 20 essential digital skills needed according to this research to be functional in the workplace. So I'm not even sure if these can be considered only digital skills, they're employability skills. Do we include these in our teaching and learning? I think that's something we need to think carefully about. Communication in digital means secure email messaging, video conferencing, file sharing, being safe online, handling information effectively and efficiently and safely, using transactions and online forms and using digital tools for problem solving. Are we actually teaching these skills when we're in our classrooms? I think we need to be asking ourselves that question. Those who know me know I've been banging on about soft skills for ever and ever. For many years I ran a local college, Creative Digital College, and this is what we wanted to focus on. And when you meet employers and you say, what skills are you looking for? They never say, oh, it's JavaScript, or it's how to use Photoshop, or it's how to edit. They always say this is almost without fail, it's the communication, the teamwork, problem solving, the resilience, the growth mindset that they want, not just young people, but adults entering the workforce to have. And this is just me saying this is all these reports that are listed at the bottom, and you don't mark afterwards. It's absolutely undeniable that these are actually the skills that we need to be teaching. So that's the here and now. What's the future hold? So there's some rather scary reports, depending on how you want to look at it, around the potential impacts on jobs, and this is in the very near future. Institute of Public Policy Research estimate there could be 8 million jobs displaced in the near future if we fail to adapt to the AI revolution, which is coming. And the guys from Bright Graphic coming after me, I think, will give you a lot to think about in terms of sort of the way the world is going to change, and we need to change with it as an FD sector. The good news on the other side is there's a £306 billion potential gain, economic benefit if we do embrace the AI technologies and actually train our workforce ready for the future. So just a little look about what that might mean. AI changing jobs is now, it's not the future. So in the next 1 to 3 years, AI will automate routine back office and administrative tasks. In the next 3 to 5 years, there will be integrated AI systems, non-routine roles, more white-collar jobs, and actually we start coming into sort of teaching and learning and how it's going to affect us in our professional lives and our jobs, as well as other managerial, retail, IT, and content creation, mid-level, high-paid jobs. In the future, with AGI, it's artificial intelligence that can replicate human intelligence and actually interact with us. In a human way, even social people-facing jobs could be at risk. So, the highest exposure jobs are those entry-level jobs, and the research highlights often disproportionately held by women, also definitely held by young people. And I can already see those junior-level roles drying up in terms of software development and some of the other tech stuff that we're doing. It's something I'm concerned about, and actually there needs to be some accord with industry about how this is going to work, and we don't just cut all of the junior type of jobs out. Teaching education is in that mid-exposure level and low exposure roles, more like skilled trades, health professionals, care services, and construction. But the good news is when I was researching this talk, and I was saying, well, what are employers saying? What skills are going to be important to them in this AI-powered future? It actually didn't look too different to the skills that they say they want now. So these advanced digital and AI skills, yeah, they're going to want to be AI literate, and we better get our young people AI literate, otherwise they're not going to be able to take part in social using aware of cybersecurity and prompt engineering and coding, sure, but the higher order cognitive skills don't look that different. Analytical, critical thinking, great problem solving, innovation, complex reasoning, adaptability, collaboration, communication, empathy. these are the same skills that we're talking about now. These are the same skills that we can embed across our curriculum, and we should be embedding across our curriculum. So we need to think about how we're going to create this kind of future agile curriculum. We need to work with people who know best. We need to work alongside industry. We can't, as an education sector, exist in a bubble. And that means co-designing our curriculum. That means working with set live briefs. That means flexible modular pathways. That means us as digital leaders, as educators, we have to lead the way for young people, both how we behave in the classroom, the schools we use, and the way that we set an example about what actual digital skills means now and is going to mean in the future. There's the Skills England AA Opportunities Action Plan that calls for exactly this kind of approach. So again, this isn't just me saying this. This is really clear and evidence-based that we have to change. This new one, I've got to say I'm biased, but I love the skills bootcamp model because it's flexible and it's responsive, and you can work with employers. And I really enjoy designing and running those. Actually, I'm really pleased that we're doing this. And I think that's a really interesting way that education is moving, and removing some of those systemic issues I think that can hold back innovation. So we measure our success in very stringent ways: qualification, progression, outcomes. Progression is only really what you put on the ILR the day they leave. The contract value spend is often what senior leaders are looking at. Qualification rates is what senior leaders are looking at. Also, the quality of teaching and learning and everything else is obviously super important. But is this giving them the skills that we need for work? Our standardised assessments giving the skills we need for work? I would say they're out of date the minute they get published. So how can we change the paradigm around education about what we do? Employers are going to want now and in the future digital literacy, problem solvers. They're going to want adaptable learners with digital confidence and people who can flex, not just pass. So it's not just about passing qualifications. This is about creating a workforce that can be really adaptable, really resilient to change. So there's two ways, dystopia, utopia. I'm hopeful. We're not going to have AI displacing everyone to the point that we become de-skilled, devalued, and there's widening inequality, and education fails with that. I believe we can enhance human potential with AI. I believe our role in FE is really central to this and really, really important. We need to take action. Some of the feedback in the workshop was around senior leadership don't give us the time to get the CED we need, it was a lot about the blockers, and I think we need to mobilise and make sure we get this message going from top to bottom of all the institutions that we're working with, that there has to be change. And again, the AI action plan says business as usual is not an option. We have to follow this. We're certainly going to put it in the next LSIT report for as well, so hopefully that gets read by the senior leaders. So focus on the human element, build the trust relationships and the personal support that's absolutely essential. Use AI. I know there's some schools that have banned it. I don't know about FE, I really hope not. Really interested debate about how we deploy this in the classroom, how it affects learning. Could talk for a long time about that. Equip our learners to build the digital confidence alongside those human skills, because those are going to be the skills that they can carry them through. I'll leave you with a thought, and this is what we discussed in the workshop, and there was some great feedback. I'd encourage you to take any action you can take, small changes that you can make now in our teaching practice, in our curriculum design, in our assessment. And especially about professional development, there's a lot of blockers on that. We're out of time. If we get the wrong training, take control of it, and there's a lot of free and cheap stuff out there. You can actually ask ChatGPT to teach you things as well. So use the AI tools to train yourself and get yourself trained. It's absolutely imperative. And yeah, that is my talk. So I encourage you to take this back to organisations, to speak to senior leaders, to speak in your teams about what change you you can make now. For the LSIP stuff, I'd encourage you to go and have a look on Future Skills Sussex. There's a whole bunch of deep dives just being published this week, I think, which are full of data, full of employer view and everything else. So if you want to know what's happening, go over there. My email's on there, my phone's on there. I can chat if anyone wants to talk to me. I also run a free meetup as part of Silicon Brighton meetup, so I'd encourage you to have a look at that. They're all run by volunteers, they're all free. You can go and meet industry professionals and find out what's going on in the workplace, get people involved in your curriculum. There's over 30 meetups. My one's called Tech Jumpstart, which is about careers. So yeah, love to see you there. If you want to come on. And that's it. Thank you very much.
It's really good to know, what's actually needed on the ground right now, but also it's interesting to think about how our education system that was designed by the Victorians really needs to start changing. And I think if any sector's going to do it, it's got to be the FE sector. That's I think is the most important to do that. Thank you very much, Dan. So now I'm going to introduce our last speakers of the day, and that is Simon Wilkinson and Myra Ackman from Bright Black.
Hi. Hi. We're Myra. Simon, Myra. We make interactive, playable, immersive culture from video games to installations, so like real space things that use live performers, VR, AR, AI, fashion. And the reason we're doing that is because we've been at a convergence in terms of all these skills for a long time. And we've come through different industries that are really siloed, so film, creative industries, music, and found that there was a real lack of innovation and experimentation when they're really silos. And they're often characterised by hierarchies and massive egos. So we escaped and we started doing lots of more experimental stuff. So in abandoned warehouses, abandoned toilets, in venues, including Tate Modern. We've toured our works in labs, so we run learning programs as well. Across the world, so 35 countries on 5 continents. We've worked with the Royal Shakespeare Company, the British Council, also hundreds of grassroots organisations. So we do really small experiments and then we scale them up as well, so we can start to engage with big audiences. So we want to talk about real stuff, complex questions of our time, and reach mass audiences at the same time, because we don't believe the two are mutually exclusive. So here's a little snippet of our showreel.
Okay, that's what it all looks like, feels like. Unlike a lot of artists, we are weirdly, we trained as economists and then became artists later. And in line with that, we work with a lot of academic institutions. We think a lot about economics in our work. And in 2017, related to what we're going to talk about today, we started working with 11 centres for future intelligence at Cambridge University. And initially as artists in residence. 2017 was 8 years ago. 8 years used to be not that long, right? But in AI terms, that's your learning. I'm sure that is a very, very long time. In 2017, a shock had just happened because the previous year, a computer beat one of the world's leading players of game Go, Lisa Long. Didn't just beat him, completely destroyed him. In 1997, a similar competition between a AI and a human being in the game of chess, Garry Kasparov, resulted in the AI just about winning. That AI beat Garry Kasparov with brute force calculation. It used something like 400,000 burgers worth of energy to beat Garry Kasparov, who used about a burger and a half worth of energy. But in 2016, Lisa Doll was beaten by machine learning. So this was a machine that had trained itself on thousands of versions of the game, then played itself thousands of times, and then absolutely destroyed its human component. And the world of Go was shocked, and so was Lisa Doll. We went off to the bathroom, put water on his face, couldn't believe it. So one of the things we get asked to do is to think and to imagine futures. At the moment, we are doing a commission for Abandoned Normal Devices Festival and with Liverpool John Moores University and Lancaster University. And I'm going to show you something. So we're building a new piece of infrastructure that's called the Rodome. It's a new piece of infrastructure for the fifth industrial revolution. We're going to talk to you about that in this space. It's a place we're kind of seeing as a place to refine connection again. And I'm going to explain that now. So here's a look at it. It's built in the image of a long barrow. So a traditional Neolithic long barrow, often east to west, where the east was the land of the living, the west direction was the land of the dead. For us, the east is the land of those people who are yet to be born, people who are going to have the ramifications of the decisions we make today, and the west is the land of the ancestors. And in terms of those ancestors, there's a reason to this believing. I'm going to show you a few things. So this is, and I have to find out because I won't remember it, Habsburg footprints. So a few years ago, some footprints were discovered. A landslide happened, these footprints were revealed, and they were 900,000 years old. So that's one of the oldest evidences of upright humans being in the United Kingdom, which still at that point had a land bridge. It was in a relatively cool period of our history. And it shows what looks like it may have been a family group. It looks like it's women, men, children, all walking together. So you can imagine kind of an image of these people walking across this land and leaving their footprints together. This is a hand axe. This is 225,000 years old. It was discovered this is the Wolstonian hand axe. It was discovered a few years ago, and what you can see is there's a lot of time passed between the initial thing that I showed you and this one. And what you can also see is this was discovered, its origins are from a kind of cooler period of our history, but not a lot's changed in terms of human development, in terms of technology. You can see it's been a hell of a long time, but just a little bit of change. But it does show that we had a connection with nature at that point. We were literally following the seasons, we were following animals, we were following tides, and we were part of nature, very much connected with nature at that point. This is from Great Cracks. There's a series of caves up near Nottingham. If you look closely at this object, you can see there's a horse carved into it. And you can see that we kind of had a relationship with ourselves as well. We had stories about ourselves. So there's this sort of image of human beings at this point as quite connected to ourselves, to the world we lived in, to each other. But that began to change, and this the next object is from 4,000 years ago, 4,200 years ago. So this is a beaker from the beaker people. What's interesting about this is this change begins around the time of the Holocene. So the climate starts calming down a bit, it becomes more stable, we can stay still, we can do farming, things like this. And this is where academics note that we start to see that some people become more important than others. And we know that because of the things left in graves. So this is an actual grave that this beaker comes from. And this person was clearly a celebrated individual. But it's the beginning of a change. So we've had 900,000 years of relative egalitarianism. And then suddenly we begin to move from a world where the majority of people are born to work together to a world where the majority of people are born to work with someone more powerful than themselves. That's the era we've been born into. This is not Elon Musk territory. The people who are more important in this world don't own $435 billion worth of wealth. You probably still know them, you probably still talk to them, but they're more important than you, and you reflect that in their burials.
So, there were many technologies. Before we started all the revolutions, so as you saw, the hand axe, the paintbrush, the Gutenberg press in 1440, and they all had a huge impact on their populations. The Gutenberg press at the time, religiosity and religion was a hugely dominant force. And even within the clergy, they were massively disused about this. So conservatives called it a mechanical corruption of the divine, and they were very fearful of ordinary people owning a lot or having access to a lot of knowledge. But on the other side of the scale, there were those who were using it to distribute information about religion, and they called it God's extreme and high act of grace. And 300 years later, we had what we called the first industrial revolution, around coal, around iron smelting, around steam engines, and this meant the mechanisation of labour. So you had the first kind of urbanisation and factory systems. This woman is a knocker-upper, so she's got a pea shooter and she's blowing peas at people's windows who are now in urban terrace houses about to go to work in a factory. They haven't invented the alarm clock yet, so she's the alarm clock. And it took till the second industrial revolution for her job to be automated and people to have alarm clocks in their homes. And the second industrial revolution was around steel and also thinking about electricity and the internal combustion engine. And this is where you saw large corporations emerge. So it was automation on a large scale and global trade networks. So it was hitting many countries at once. And then just 60 years later, you had the third industrial revolution. And this was around computers, software, electronics, robotics coming in. And the mass digitalisation of work, so automation happening through digitalisation, and moving from the service economy to knowledge economy. So the price and the value of knowledge became massive, so we were using our bodies less in terms of physical labour. But all of these systems relied on exploitative practices, so areas of the world that became very wealthy through this mass automation were also relying on systems like slavery and extraction of resources. So you saw jumps in temperature and the climate change. And then came 40 years later, the fourth industrial revolution. economies. So Amazon, as we all know, a massive platform economy that changed the shape of the labour force. And when you add to that real-time data, you get economies like Uber and change work from freelance kind of gig work with minimal legal kind of standards. And at the moment we're in, 20 years later, you know, and simultaneously with the fourth and the fifth, is the fifth industrial revolution around human and AI symbiosis. So starting to look at post-disciplinary ways of knowing and learning, and also thinking about collaborating with non-human entities. So AGI being something much more non-human that we are going to have to learn to understand and work with if we are to continue. So really we've been thinking about, could this moment be about automation that is not for oppression, but automation that's for liberation, and a real re-evaluation of the human purpose and who we are. And maybe we need a radical shift in order to do that.
So, in case anybody hasn't heard the term artificial general intelligence, or you're not sure what it is, what it isn't is AI, a bit more AI. It's a lot more AI. So, to put it this way, AI is essentially dumb. It trains on lots of data. It's like having a teacher who's read every single book, and you can ask it a question that will come back pretty consistently, give you most of the time the correct answer. And so that's quite amazing. But if we asked it a question that wasn't in its training data or wasn't on the internet, that relied on it understanding the world, it wouldn't have an answer for you. The problem is actually ChatGPT, for example, would try and answer and get it wrong. It used to be that if you asked something like ChatGPT, if I hang a mouse by its tail, what's near the floor, its nose or its ears, it wouldn't know because it doesn't understand the mouse, it doesn't understand, it just knows what it's read. That's changed because Murray Shanahan, one of the academics who've been working with, has written about that and put that in his books, and now it knows. Right? But it doesn't mean that it understands the world. AGI understands the world. It's theoretical, it hasn't happened yet. AGI not only understands the world far better than we do, because it can sense things that we can't. We think we're living in a world that if you follow M theory in physics, we live in a world of 11 dimensions. We can only sense a few of them, right? We've got 5 senses, and we're wandering around mainly blind to the world. And AGI won't necessarily be like that. And AGI, if it ever happens, will be exponentially more intelligent than human being. And what that means for labour, and this blip of time that's only 4,000 years old, is that there will be no jobs that it will be economical for humans to do. And that throws us into a fork in the road, which could be very dark in one direction. Our job is to think about the other direction. So we're thinking about, what does it mean? If instead of thinking about it as us being robbed of our labour, think about it being free from our labour, what questions does that throw up? And the primary one that Myra mentioned is this question of, well, we're here, so we put it as, what is the role of human learning? Or what is the role of a human? What do we need to learn? And why are we here if we're not here to work anymore? That can seem really scary until you remember it's only been like this for 4,000 years. And so what we're thinking about is, who are the stakeholders in this future? If we're going to do it so that we're taking care of not only ourselves, but also our long-term story and our connection with ourselves, also the people who haven't been born yet, so that we're making decisions that are going to be beneficial to them. Because change now happens very rapidly. It doesn't happen in 100 years anymore, it happens in 2 years, it happens in 6 months. The planet, we've been chasing economic growth for a long time, and it's been at the peril of the planet. It's been at the peril of individual people. We live in a country where you don't get people working for $1 a day very often, but we're living wearing the products they make. One of the experiments we did recently was to try and see if we could make enough money to live making clothes here, and it's impossible. People don't earn enough to pay the wages we would need to make a pair of trousers. It's just not possible. We rely on cheap labour from other places. So what we're thinking is, rather than think of it as a negative story, what about if it's a positive story? Because if don't visualise a future where it is a positive story, you can bet that it will be inevitable.
So our practice really is about creating stories, but also meaningful spaces for people to participate in those stories. So we're moving, and we have been for a long time, from a place where the story of us was maybe in a spoken word or a book or a text. And if you think about it as the massive industrialisation of storytelling, but when we come to media like the Gutenberg press, and television and cinema, we are consuming a story that starts at A and finishes at B, and it has a linear curve. And now we're in the era of spatial computing and sensory storytelling, and we are trying to get back to a time where we can engage with stories with agency and interaction. So we use software like real-time engines, which this is built in Unity Games Engine, and this is a foundational software for the video game industry. And video games contain billions of stories. So video games are worth $300 billion revenue per year at the moment. And if you took film as a comparison, it is 12 billion, and music is much less than that. So we're in a cultural moment where young people, and actually they're not all young people, many people get their stories in video games. And one of the key reasons is agency, interaction, being able to create your own story. So when we create worlds in games engines and other technologies, we're thinking about what is that world. So here we're talking about a post-labor world. And what is the question we can place in the heart of that, the speculative question. And how can we build stories around it that allow other people, audiences, you guys, to engage with the question in an imaginative, non-threatening way where we can overcome our biases and fears and try to imagine something new.
We have done our time, but let's just finish with this last thought. How likely is this to happen? So, traditionally, computer scientists took it seriously for quite a long time. They revised their timings for this to happen. Economists have been opposed to the idea that AGI will result in full automation because it would require government intervention, and while the economists don't like government intervention. But that's changing. So we know, we've spoken to somebody at JP Morgan who says they're making mitigations for automation. We know that the IMF with Anton Koronek that we quoted earlier are making mitigations for full automation. We know that the tech companies themselves are quoting, so ChatGPT, OpenAI, said they know how to make AGI and it could be next year. That's probably not true. But others have said it will be before the end of 2030. So when change happens now, when we're talking about tech changes, we're talking about Moore's law. For those of you who know about Moore's law, it's an exponential. Humans aren't very good at understanding exponentials, but it means things happen super quick, increasingly quickly. So our point is we need to be thinking about this. We need to be thinking about who we are, why we're here, and start planning for that.
I'm sure you all are mind blown as I am about by that. I mean, what's really is to have that hope that we can change the narrative, and we've got, I feel empowered by that kind of message of hope. So thank you so much to Simon and Myra from Right Black. I'm
everyone sitting up there? All right. Welcome to question time. As you notice, I'm not actually the others. But more importantly, this isn't a bunch of boring politicians. As you've heard them all already today, apart from Tom here. Tom is from Body Squat, so he's going to be part of the panel. But all our other members are people who are working at the cutting edge, really. So all have very different ideas. We found out about AI. So what we're going to do, firstly, if anyone gets really hot, I'd recommend just nipping out in the stairwell there. It's the only cold place in the whole of Sussex. Sit out there if you're feeling really hot. We're going to have a general discussion about AI and the future of education. And there'll be an opportunity for people to have their comments as well. Nick is hopping around with a microphone if you want to at any point stick out at first, obviously. And we're going to have the general discussion, and then Janet's going to close the conference, but then we decided we'd carry on with the Q&A after that, so there'll be a break after the main bit of the panel debate, where people can come back if you want to and continue the discussion, because there won't be enough time, I'm sure, to answer everyone's questions, or to listen to everyone's point of view. Now, on that note, I think also, if you've got time to speak, or if you've got something to say, try and keep it brief, and also try and keep it in the spirit of, I know this is an emotional subject for lots of people, and I'm sure no one will be inappropriate, but we need to keep it amicable and friendly. That's just from people on the panel who've been in these situations before, where they've got a little bit out of hand. I'm sure. Firstly, before we start, I'm going to go to Chris to explain what's going on behind us.
Right. So let's see if this is working. No, right. So I'll just speak loudly. So I'm going to name check a really brilliant Brighton creative called Chris Chowan. He used to run a thing called Fusebox, which isn't around anymore. But he developed a little bit of code that listens to conversations and then decides what artistic style it thinks it should be expressed in. And so our Q&A today will be painted as we speak. And earlier on you might remember that I spoke about the power of words and how things can be conjured up through the power of words. And so just to add one thing is that Chris has also done a really lovely version of this that works on just a website that can be used in classrooms. And if you're interested in trying to experiment with that, then just drop us a line at the end. But who knows? I do want to say, oh my God, I'm staring at a whole bunch of loads of cheeky monkeys looking at me. There are hundreds of them. Some of them got big ears, some of them got really, really spiky hair. I think I'll do that.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Well, the first topic of conversation is, what are the skills and qualities that we need to be developing in the young people today to prepare them for this future? Actually, Tom, you want to go first?
Okay, I'll try probably one of the least people to ask this question as I'm implementation. I would say that the main qualities people need is an awareness and understanding of how this technology works, so that they are in the best position to discern the quality of what they are receiving and understand where it comes from. And with that, you need to combine it with, critical thinking skills, problem solving skills. I think it's already mentioned. So I think those are the main ones. Because the real challenge going ahead is going to be really understanding the truth from fiction, understanding what it is to be objective in this world, and I think that is going to be a real force for people that are
Thanks, Tom. Do you want to pass the mic to James?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, with the current assessment system being taught a new one because of AI in terms of essays and whatnot, I think one of the key critical skills for a lot of students is going to be, and both Body Swaps and ours does this, is building soft skills in terms of how people speak. And I think a lot more traditional essays and assignments is actually going to be done via people speaking like in a circle about a particular topic rather than getting everyone to do an essay and everyone's already done the AI for an essay. So I think that essay writing is still going to be a thing, but I think it's going to be obviously that combination of AI with your own skills to build that, but then soft skills is going to be vital for everything, and a lot of people said that the pandemic has been very damaging to a lot of students' soft skills, and I think that's what they're going to need, and more important than ever. I think one of the presentations, I think it was your own earlier today, said that that was going to be, the biggest thing essentially. So.
Thanks, James. That's one quiz.
I think the students need to have skills of the crew of Starship Enterprise. I think they need to be prepared to boldly go where no people have ever gone before, and so for that you're going to need like an optimistic frame of mind, you're going to need data, you're going to need like a black hat thinker that kind of knows all what could go wrong, but also what could go right. And so I think if you look at the crew of Starship Enterprise, they've got exactly the right skills to navigate what happens next.
That's great.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's about soft skills, and that is really important. I think being in a human setting and being amongst people and feeling comfortable and in real life still being the most valuable connection you can have with people, I think is really, really important, because that could be lost with the way we work, the way we communicate and everything else. And I think anyone who just watched last week on TV over this weekend, the power of human connection, you cannot replace that with AI. You cannot, and I think it's really important that we keep our young people social and confident and able to deal with groups of people not agreeing with them, things being different, and being able to communicate, challenge, be challenged, and continue to operate in that sort of social environment. I think that could be lost in that sort of technology. I think it's important to keep.
Thanks, Simon.
I'm going to say two things. One is kind of like general. So I've got 3 children, and what I've said to all of them is what you want to do is get yourself to the point, at some point in your life, you might be 50 when you get there, where you are comfortable in a room with people, both as the centre of attention and quiet in the corner, so that you can listen, so you can actually listen to people and learn things. When it comes to learning, we have these amazing tools, and there's a lot of controversy about it. I can tell you for me, so I'm ADHD, so reading a book, I read loads of books, and it's a bit of trouble, but you learn amazing things. It takes ages. Now, when we're researching a project, like the thing we're talking about here, is 3 months of research into ancient history and various other things. And an hour in the car talking to ChatGPT and asking it questions is incredible. The cognitive gains off the scale. But you've got to know how to talk to it. And I think the danger is that you ask it to write your essay. That's the worst case, because it's actually rubbish at writing essays anyway. But the best case is to, I'll give you an example. When I should have been going to sleep, I suddenly thought, I wonder how you calculate the volume of an irregular shape like a rock, so I asked ChatGPT and it gave me the answer. And it wasn't the end, it was niggling. It was like, can that be accurate? I went, can that never be accurate? And they went, no, it can't be 100% accurate. And I'm like, isn't that a problem? And they went, yeah, that is a problem with physics, that none of its equations are 100% accurate. And I was like, but isn't that what Anthony Wilson said about the map is not territory? Isn't that what it is? And they're like, yeah. When he originally said that, and I was like, I've got a new friend. This is amazing. I've learned so much in the last 2 minutes that it's incredibly inspiring. I think we need to stop in general telling people, young people, their culture is rubbish. We've been doing it for decades and decades. We did it about video games, now it's dominating. We need to embrace it, and we need to make sure it's used really, really well.
Thanks, Simon. Myra?
Yeah, I guess on the back of that, to challenge you, Jim, they're the questions. Because what if we ask, what do we need to do for young people? So we are constantly in rooms of lots of different types of people, not just young, but what we see a lot is psychological barriers or sort of invisible barriers. So one that used to happen a lot when we were running our labs all over the world, this happened. There wasn't a country where it didn't happen. young women would be so low confidence, especially with technology, and they would be so much quieter. And this goes for intersectional groups as well, like neurodiverse groups. And young men would be very confident with the technology, but kind of steer away from the creativity. And this is reflected in our company as well. Simon gets put as the tech guy, and I get put as the sort of creative. And we're in a moment, or we have been for a long time, where those distinctions don't apply anymore. They don't apply in learning, they don't apply in the workplace. And are we actually getting people ready for a work situation or a life that involves all of these skills? So when I learned the games engine, I had to take down a lot of those psychological barriers because they're embedded in our culture. You know, in 1938, I think it was, there were more women qualifying as computer scientists than men. And then the narrative flipped to be like, boys, computers are for boys. And that has stayed with us. And as soon as I started teaching the games engine and Simon started doing the story stuff, the dynamic in the room completely flipped. And young women would come to me and still quite low confidence, but say, is this okay to use this tool, to use this technology? So I think in the kind of interrogating the questions we're asking, you know, when we're in positions of power, but also all the way through to when we're using the tools themselves, we need better questions and we're not asking them. Maybe we're just not well researched or used to using critical, creative thinking ourselves.
Thanks, Mara. Has anyone got anything to say in the audience? Stick your hand up. Somebody up there at the back, yeah? Nick, you
had to be right at the back, didn't it, for the first 2 seconds. Was it you?
My question is the first speaker, so I've got the name Dan Walker, sorry, yeah. You were telling us about skills for the future, which I was quite impressed by. And then by the thought of speaks like that, it seems to be that
You might have to speak up because the mic's not working. Can you shout?
You've got it on there.
Check.
So yeah, my question, can you hear me there? Yeah, is for Dan. You were giving us an idea of the future, how we should be preparing young people with skills for that future. But then, and I sort of got that, felt encouraged by that, but then when the fourth right was going on, we were painting this kind of future that seemed very, very radically different, and the timescale in which it would be elaborated seemed to be much reduced, so it's like 4 years, 5 years. So Dan, could you answer how what you said was still true or reasonable or worthwhile?
Yeah.
So I don't mean it to sound accusatory.
Good question.
There's different versions of the future reality that we may see, and we don't know what that's going to be. It could be partial displacement of jobs, which is almost definitely going to happen. It could be complete displacement of jobs. And I've heard a talk where someone said that that's what's going to happen. I don't quite understand what that future looks like, because capitalism relies, or the system that we live in relies on people working, paying tax, being consumers, being producers. I don't quite understand what happens in that future. These guys might have no idea. So I kind of have to work on the basis that humans are going to come to some kind of arrangement with ourselves. And I don't know what that actually looks like, but what I do know is that whatever that looks like, we're going to have to still communicate, still negotiate. There's going to be winners and losers, as there will be in every society, however it shakes down. So I'm doing it like, I don't know what the jobs are going to look like. And I feel for young people who I know are feeling really done out of things, that they're learning how to, they're being taught things that they know are going to be debunked. So my slide there was around, whatever the job market, if it exists or whatever it looks like, I hope there's going to be a society, and the robots won't kill us.
So you're going to have to use these skills, so they're going to be really, really important. So I guess that's where I'm coming from. I can't tell you what the jobs in the future, and if there are going to be them. I don't know. It kind of blows my mind. But I have to remain hopeful that we're going to continue down this road, that we're going to find a way.
So anyone else? You don't have to respond.
You can pass this down, if you talk quite close to the mic.
I really responded to what the previous speaker said, but when I first saw the panel, I just thought that's reinforcing stereotype. You know, that's my first thought when I saw the panel. I thought, right, okay, and you flagged that kind of up. On the notion, if you think of students, you know, young people, you can't be what you can't see. So.
So I think from all the speakers today, it's really exciting to see what can be done with AI, but there's always like weighing on my conscience, and that's the environmental aspect of it, like how much power it uses. I don't really know who I want to ask it to, so I guess you can volunteer whoever wants to speak, but how do you balance that sort of use of AI with the energy consumption and the impact on the environment?
So, we've done a lot of research on this. So, you're right, we've created another thing that uses a lot of carbon, also a lot of water. It's a bit forgotten sometimes. However, when we're looking at new technologies, we have to look at what they're replacing and weigh that as well. This is going to be unpopular, by the way, just like that up front. So, one search on ChatGPT is 0.02 grams of carbon, 0.2 grams of carbon, which is double a Google search, but they are not equal. So if I want to know something on ChatGPT, I ask it a prompt, it comes back with something. I may ask another prompt, it comes back. I may end up using 1 gram of carbon. If I ask the same question to Google, what I'll get is a bunch of things to buy. And I end up doing like 20 searches to get to the thing. It's become very efficient, Google, and those tools, right? So it's sort of replacing that. But moreover, the way we're using it is replacing books. And that is where this is going to be unpopular. One book is 2.6 to 3 kilograms of carbon. The publishing industry, you can tell I'm nervous to say this properly. The print publishing industry is 3,000 times more carbon emitting than the AI industry. That's what we're replacing. If we were serious about carbon emission reduction, everybody here would not buy a book. They'd be reading an ebook, some people don't like it. And the thing about that is you've been telling people with SUVs to stop riding them for years and moaning when they say they're kind of attached to them, you know, all that kind of stuff. We are replacing things with new technologies. When we look at, for example, generative video with something like Kling or Runway, you know, your models, is way less carbon emitting than driving 10 people to the desert and shooting a film. There was a little bit of a midway point with video, which was virtual production. We were quite involved in virtual production. Equally, quite horrendous use of carbon, but way better than a film shoot in the desert, as an example. So if I was going to shoot a music video this weekend, and I was going to take 5 people around 6 locations, the carbon emissions from that are hundreds of times worse than using generative AI. So when we're thinking about these things, we need to be sober, and we need to not be emotionally dragged down pathways. I think a lot of people are complaining about carbon emissions and yet still buying books because we fear AI, and that makes a lot of sense. The real problem with AI is a lot of people aren't being paid. That's a much bigger problem. And it is getting some attention to the carbon emissions. I'm telling you, it's a bit of a misnomer. Let alone the fact that AI will probably help us at some point be better at generating electricity potentially.
Also, the most terrifying thing about the large scale LLM, so again, we are using a massive umbrella term, AI, to describe many things, and that's because that's how AI was conceived, as a kind of romantic word to describe and sell a new technology, which was emerging at the time, so we sort of use it in that way. But basically, if we're talking about large language learning models, which is what you've been talking about, we've been, deconstructing the kind of carbon and water footprint. But I'm going to go on to say then. Oh, scaling. So if you look at OpenAI, the pace at which the scaling is happening. So, for example, building data centres in communities where water supply is really scarce, and the lack of rigour and laws around that. So OpenAI are building loads of data centres in places that are suffering from shortages already. There's a great book called The Empire of AI by Karen Howe. She's based on interviews, actual first-person interviews with over, it's like 260 people in the sector. She actually went to MIT, studied engineering with these guys, with these people we hold up as the godfathers of AI, and talks about them as like, oh yeah, we just be wandering around the corridors in our pajamas. So I don't think of them as gods, they're just normal people who had the skills to acquire investment or bright ideas with investment backing, but she talks a lot about this sort of water impacts, but this idea of this mythical genius who attracts all this investment, which means it can scale so rapidly without being interrogated and without enough contestation. And that's different to LLMs, which are open source. There are LLMs that can run on very small data sets, and there are models that don't run like that. So we need to make a distinction when we're talking about LLMs or AI, when we're talking about massive corporations, which across every single industry are hugely problematic. Or we're talking about adaptive small companies or collectives that are using it for different, or modelling it in a different way.
Thanks, Mike. Anyone else? We need to turn on to the subject of sustainability. We'll continue with Chris. Somebody up there at the back? Anyone online? Oh, sorry, we'll continue next time.
No, they answered it. That was amazing. Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay. Anyone want to say anything in defence of their books?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So you mentioned about sort of the redundancy of books, and my question is, with AI or search engines we're looking at, where do we fact check it? The editability around the data sets. How do we know what we're being told is accurate? Where do we trust it? Who owns the data? Because isn't data power?
Fact checking. Want to go with that one? Yep, Chris.
So, from what I understand, people are very cagey about what information is in those systems because there are legal cases pending. And so they're a bit of a black box. And even the prompts that are going in are being rewritten in the background so it understands it better. So it's kind of another black box within another black box. It's really, really tricky. What I would say is, if you look at the images that have been produced behind us, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily stereotyped images. If we just go back, there was a round of applause earlier on about gender stereotypes. In the sense that a lot of the images haven't just been men, they've been people of all kinds of colour. And I think the AI space is a place where you can actually factor bias out, whereas in real life you cannot. You're always going to be judged when you're going to the bank and trying to get a loan. That can't be factored out of the world because it is, bias is part of life. But I think there's a lot of anxiety around AI being automatically this or automatically that. But the reality is it's a space that could be absolutely new. And I was with Bright Black in Bradford recently at the VR conference. And I would say that was probably 60% women, absolutely like the ideal amount of representation of all different types of people. And so this is an opportunity to start new in a way, to kind of build these things out.
So that's what others say. They're black boxes, but they're black boxes that on one level we can control. Maybe I think out of that, I think this will be an evolving conversation. There are biases in everything that we have with regard to AI. Everyone here or teachers are biased, artificial is biased. So the question is like, where does that bias come from in our machine learning models? And those foundation models were sucked up at great speed from a variety of probably some dubious and some good sources. And I see one of the big values going ahead is to get ever better data sets. Now, of course, we have to find what is better. My question will be any conversations about that because it's very much chestnut to guard in, guard out. What is interesting will be to watch space with Musk talk about rewriting it sounds pretty scary. There's already whole sites of synthetic data where you get computers to generate the data and then the model get trained on, which is used in cars, self-driving cars, and lots of other use cases. So you get into this really murky place where machine models built on synthesized data or synthesized data about that. But maybe that's what we can do as humans as well. So I don't know if it's a solvable answer. I suspect the legal court cases or try and answer some of them. A lot of them will be swept under the carpet because the economic benefit is just too large to do it like that. So that whole
Just a quick question for those in the room who've been using AI for a year or so. Do you feel that it's less biased than it was? That there's less bias and it's more accurate? It's less misinformation, stroke hallucination? Hands up if you feel it's getting better. Hands up if you feel it's not there. And hands up if you feel it's getting worse. Okay.
Just becoming more used to it, with believing it more.
Can you get the microphone, please?
I'm just saying that maybe it's not that we can tell if it's more accurate, it's just now we're believing it.
Okay, that's interesting.
Or that our prompting is getting better.
Say that again?
Our prompting is getting better.
Or we get better at using it.
Becoming used to it.
Yeah. So that's the
So this might be a sort of adjacent answer to a slightly different question, but around sort of bias or something around, my thoughts on AI as social inequalities and sort of things that it can be an amazing bridge to close social inequality gaps that those who didn't have the information or the access to that personalised information can now get it where they need it. People who couldn't write letters and write a doctor or a politician, whatever it is, can now write a letter. People who couldn't write a business plan can now write a business plan. And I think it's going to be a driver of helping to overcome barriers to social inequalities by giving them powers that they didn't have before. So there may be slides built into the models if you ask the top 20 authors and this kind of stuff. That may still be true. But I think it's something that you can do to really help those inequality gaps.
Great.
There's a question just down here, Jim.
With regard to, you could ask ChatGPT to tell you the sources, number one. But secondly, the reason you think it's better than it was is because the AI companies know it's wrong. So we've seen inside the data set of Midjourney, because academics have been going and explaining, and it's horrible. It's awful with sort of medical images and all sorts of terrible things, like people literally in beds with swords and stuff like this. So what those companies did is, I think you alluded to it, when you ask an image generator to make something, let's say you say, make an image of a CEO, naturally, because its data set is horrendously biased, it will give you an old man. And it'll do it over and over again. So what happens is the companies put in secondary hidden prompts, which randomise the gender, which randomise the race. That's what's happening. So the data sets are still terrible. That's bad. Big commercial companies, they know you don't like it when it's biased, and so they dealt with it in a kind of elastic way. That's what's been going on.
Okay.
I feel a little bit like this is a bit of a boring question actually after all the much higher up stuff, and I'm a bit of a spinal tap practical question at this point. The time it takes for an exam board to conceive, go through all of the off-qual applications and launch a qualification is entirely out of line with the time and speeds that you guys are talking about with things moving alongside it. And I hate that to be a blocker, because I'm not saying this in a way of we can't do it. But what I would say is to your knowledge, as people who probably work in these circles as a regular thing, are these conversations actively happening within the people who set our parameters to get our funding, to get our outcomes, etc.? Because I know that there's a leap of faith that we could take as teachers and as deliverers of learning to the young people we work with to challenge not writing essays all the time, not just making dry outcomes for their learning, which we all want to do. But the ball and chain that we will have on a weekly, monthly, termly basis is a criterion of A to B to F outcomes that someone has very dryly designed for us to deliver. Now, I think we can still challenge that within our delivery and our mindset towards it, but someone comes round and EQAs our assessment at the end of the day, and unless they're a step ahead of this conversation, we're a little bit stuck, because we have to rely on those guys, and we can't get our funding. Sorry, that is so boring to say, but we can't get our outcomes without that. So, yeah, do any of you guys have any experience of working with people in those worlds? Because I think they are the people who probably need it even more than we do.
Yeah, so we've been trying to work with loads of AOs to innovate in numerous different ways. So obviously in our area, it's trying to get more immersive into quals. And we've had some relative success with a few AOs, like Ascentis is one of our standout AOs who want to innovate, who want to drive immersive NTFE. We've had conversations with nearly all the AOs, and we're 100% committed to changing assessment for the better in the future by working with those AOs. The big blocker is off-qual, and that's what we want to do, is basically form a whole group of committee to say to off-qual, you need to change because some of your assessments haven't been modified since the Victorian age. You need to change both, in terms of the AI, but then also immersive, and trying to get a lot more innovation into assessment, because, as I said in my previous answer, AI to a large extent is driving a hole through some of the current assessment methods that we have. So fundamentally needs to change soon, and will only change if everyone, teacher, college, AO, is essentially lobbying off-qual and lobbying government for that change.
Thanks, James. Dan? In the digital sector, it's not the same in every sector. In the digital sector, employers, they don't really care about qualifications. They really don't. I've spoken to hundreds of them, they're like, we need a job. And it feels like the whole education system is beholden to these organisations, which are businesses, which are there to, exist in their money as well. And that there needs to be a fundamental change in the way that we assess teaching and learning. The whole ethics sector has to meet the needs of the awarding bodies rather than meeting the needs of learners and employers. And that for me is wrong. And I feel quite strongly about it. So there needs to be a rebellion. There needs to be some sort of change, because I don't think, as I was saying, the qualifications are out there the moment they're published in digital. I know that there's still qualifications teaching Microsoft Access if you're teaching about databases, which is criminal. And if an employer sees that and they walk you through it, they're just like, what's going on here? So yeah, I've had loads of conversations with employers about this, and they want to see change. And I think there needs to be some sort of change, because I feel for the problem you've got. Around college as well. It's a really difficult one to get around in the rest of the change.
Great. Do you feel that we are a move towards apprenticeships more and higher level apprenticeships?
so digital employees video apprenticeships was, I loved my apprentices, they were brilliant, but halfway through I just thought, I don't need to finish this, I employed them anyway. So for a training provider, you're dealing with 50% success rate, obviously thinking they're not doing the right job. And if you're happy, they're not happy because they've got a job. So I think there's a fundamental issue there too. I know it's a bit sort of gloomy, this is what I've done to the moving house. It's a different way of thinking. And I think there needs to, like I just keep saying, there needs to be a change, a shift in the whole paradigm about how we assess teaching and learning, how we deliver teaching and learning, how we get people ready for it.
Okay, so what's going on? Sorry.
Telling us a joke. It's very bad.
Okay, good. All right. So that leads on to another question, which is, I'll ask the panelists and we can open up what we feel. Say in 5 years, what should the classroom? Will there be a classroom? What should education look like in 5 years' time? Do you want to, Chris? Shall we go to you? Or could it look like? Or should it look like?
The actual physical classroom or the concept of teaching. Stretch it out.
Whatever you like.
Sorry. I'd like to see, from my perspective, everything joined up. So I would teach in the kind of HE sector. I'd like to see students linked to places like Moor, Holloway, University of Sussex from the age of 7, so that you can create something that really lifts people out of poverty. So it doesn't matter if you live on White Hawk Estate, you're linked to the University of Sussex. And all of those learnings and all those resources are going to the primary schools, the secondary schools, the FE colleges, until finally you come out and you have been elevated and changed and the poverty trap is escaped.
Thank you.
I'm not going to get to this, obviously. From my perspective, the reason at the University House is because I'm trying to create something that is really useful for you as educators. So I'm really focused on how I can solve the next problem that you have. In regards to what happens in 5 years in the classroom, I can just give you my best guesses. I don't know. I think what is one of the possible dangers of AI is this further atomisation of society. We really see that with computers and social media. And as we bring more of our learning content online, we can make it more adaptable, we can make it more personalised. So it just means that people spend more time alone with their computers. And I think one of the core things around classrooms and colleges and universities is going to be around bringing people together in some way and sharing that human experience. I don't know what form that is, and obviously I've got myself that but it's often help you become a better communicator, but I'm not going to say stuff. So I think it's really going to be interesting to define the values, and also sell that to the students, because that's important as well. As these technologies evolve, they're going to see more opportunities to do stuff themselves before going into the education system. So what is the value that the education system is going to show to students as well, to keep them engaged and want to come to places like this. So I don't know the answer, but I think it's around people, it's around sharing experience together, it's around building communities.
Thank you. James?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the assessment piece very quickly in terms of immersive, because my kind of view here is that like people who are doing vocational qualifications, again, as long as the air doesn't all overthrown in the meantime, is essentially doing it in immersive. So my dream is a whole sports hall full of students doing immersive content and immersive exams in VR. And essentially that means that they'll be practicing, or not practicing, being assessed on the skills that they're doing in a real life environment, but in a safe environment that they can do whatever they want to do, and will mirror what the actual on-work experience is. So they will be more assessed as what they've been doing in that real life job. And I just think a lot of students that have fallen really out of love with proactive assessment will actually probably get much better results from doing exams in immersive rather than just writing essays about that kind of thing. So people get better engagement that way. But fingers crossed. I'm always seeing them again.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, I think similar to now, I think they should be working in teams. I think they should be learning how to be creators, not consumers. They should be learning how to make positive impact with their work. They should be empowered to see the change they can make as individuals. And I think the thing is, you mentioned about AI being an accelerator of learning. I think it's a really important point that there's some superpowers here at the moment that are insane. You know, that you can create a product that you would need an entire team to create. There will be young people now in year 8 or whatever it is, who are just entering school, who will be running multi-million-pound businesses in their early 20s because they've got the opportunity to both create, distribute, and change the world in ways that you can't do now. So we want to give them all that power and to teach them how to use it responsibly.
Thanks, Sam.
I'm going to critique the 5-year plan because I don't think we live in that world anymore. In 2015, I was at a conference in Montreal, and delegates from different governments were in the room on a panel like this, and each one said what they were doing for VR. And VR was relatively new for most people at that point. And Canada said, we've been funding VR for 3 years, we've won these awards. So we went round, and at the end I said, we're now writing a 5-year plan, and literally the whole room burst into laughter. It was a horrendously embarrassing moment. For us, if we make a 5-year plan for our businesses, we have 4 businesses, we will go out of business in the next 6 months. We have an app which links us into real-time data, so that when we're looking at opportunities, we're using AI all the time to quickly figure out where the opportunities are, how best to approach them, and this picture changes every couple of months. And the thing is, if you're teaching children a 5-year plan of thing, you're teaching them that what you do is you make a 5-year plan, and it's going to be like a 1-second plan. We need to be real time. There are more businesses now that are real time in their use of data and their response to data, and I think that's what we should be doing.
Yeah, but I think the question was less about 5 years and more about how you feel education should be changing.
Yeah, the reason I answer that way is because we are in the probability camp. 5 years isn't a thing we can predict, so we can't say that. Pretending we can is a bit of a misnomer, because I can tell you that in 2015 there was a lot of in the conferences for VR, for example, to echo your point earlier, somebody over there, from 2010 to 2014 it was female dominated. 2015 came, there was a lot of interest in investment in VR, suddenly it went all male, it's like women being eviscerated from the planet. And there was a lot of nonsense spoken for about 2 years about how big it was going to be, how it was going to be amazing, blah blah blah, and it didn't happen. And people weren't paying attention to the real-time situation. So I would say we need to be ready for multiple different things, and it would be foolish for me to say one of them is why that's a problem.
Thank you, Mara.
I'm going to say something around, if we deem the value of academic institutions and learning is about being together in a space, then why are we gatekeeping that space? So when I went to university, there were minimal fees. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to go to university. Otherwise, I would not be sitting here. And there is no way I would have had the confidence to learn everything I know about what I'm doing now on YouTube. Which brings me to my next point. When we were working on virtual production sets with Epic Games, the virtual production genius bar, as they call it, all young guys, that come out with really expensive games degrees. So they come be using the most advanced computers, which means they would, with their talent combined and their work, be able to go straight into the games industry. But what they told us was they they didn't even know why they bothered doing the degree, because they learned everything they know from some Indian boys on YouTube. So we have to acknowledge that, because why are they doing a £30,000 games degree? But also, where is everyone else who's learning off YouTube? Why are they getting funneled from here to here to here and revolutionising at the time the film industry, which are really sought after jobs? There's this kind of misnomer that, we're talking about money here. OpenAI started as a charity, and Sam Altman and Elon Musk started it as a charity because they knew that money would not attract the talent. When they needed money, they made it into a company. So we need to look at cultivating moral ambition, taking the gates down, opening the doors for people to learn in different ways, and sort of questioning what that role is for learning and academia.
Thanks, Mara. Any more questions? Right, so...
One second. Where are you again? Sorry? Oh. There you go.
So there was lots of ideas on how to use artificial intelligence, like with game students, playing games in class, doing this in a safe environment, okay? But at some point the students have to write something to develop their academic skills. So we need to think actually how we can prevent students not using artificial intelligence to write their piece of work. How can we develop the critical thinking, the understanding, how can we use example stuff like that? Because lots of students nowadays just use artificial intelligence to write their written piece of work.
So anyone in the audience with a comment or another question around this issue of authenticity and what students do, TikTok, etc.?
What was it?
Down here.
One at the back. Over here. Over there. Point to us. Is your hand up? Is it you? There you go.
Yeah, I think we need to rethink about what we're trying to develop and what we're trying to assess in students, because the regurgitation of information days is clearly over. We don't need people to just go, I've learned all this thing by rote and can regurgitate it. I think developing critical thinking skills, which is what we're trying to do at our college group, which is using AI to create stuff explicitly in class, and then students picking it apart, discussing it, using that, and then going like maybe re-prompting it again, and then pulling out part of the answers, because the toothpaste is out of the tube and pretending it's... So I'm more interested in developing skills so they can analyse the world around them and they can navigate really quickly. We need to learn that kind of critical thinking, flexibility, which I think education is failing massively at. I hope people like your company are advising governments, because it's moving so slowly for us at the complex.
Right. Another one here. Nick?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello. Going back to the jobs that AI might repossess or remove, or whatever you want to call it, should colleges be tailoring their courses so we avoid those jobs in the future, or the near future, 6 months, 2 years, probably not 5 years, I should say. What do you guys think?
That's a really good practical question there. Yeah, you got any thoughts?
Are you saying should we not be teaching?
Yes.
Specific courses that will not be here in 2 years, or the jobs for them.
I think we should be teaching AI-enabled versions. So I teach we run a software development group now, and I've had many conversations with my trainer saying, should we be doing this? Is this actually what we should be teaching? And the answer is that, currently, software, just use software as an example, software developers are still a really important part
so many blind alleys. It destroyed my website halfway through, remade content for me, lost bits. I worked through nightmare. So I wish I had gone to software and done it, right? So that's just a little example of where kind of AI is not the be all and end all yet. When we're running our bootcamp, we're going to be running whole sections on using Cursor to support your coding, to make you quicker, to help check your work. We're not saying you're not ever going to be needed, because I believe still at this point, there's still human value in skilled individuals who understand coding. So you can apply that to different things. So I understand your question, but it's complicated. Because we don't yet know the future.
Let's all say together, we don't know. So I think it's safer to say we don't know. And you know, we're artists, we are on the outside, we're able to hopefully critique things without any conviction to any ideology or idea. That's the strength and the power of trying to be critical about all of these moments. We're going to quote Elon Musk, who said, what job should we be doing in the future? And he kind of looked really uncomfortable and weird, which is a base state. But then he said, well, I guess you just do what you love. I think now we just need to be doing what we love. Strangely liberal. And then Jan LeCun, who's the chief data scientist at Meta, he said, also looking very uncomfortable on space now, maybe we should be plumbers. And that's because robotic AI has not achieved its dexterity in any meaningful way and cannot compute creative problem solving around, you know, these types of problems like plumbing installation problems in this real world setting and apply it. So literally nobody knows. And I think the more we try to assume we know, that's when we're going to be in dangerous territory, which is not helpful.
Thank you. Chris?
I don't know if any of you know, but about a year and a half ago, Italy banned ChatGPT for the coding community. And the end result of that was that it took the coders 3 months to return, to revert to their original skills level to coding the amount they were before they'd even heard of ChatGPT. And so what I believe is that every subject that we teach has a core set of skills. And if you've got those core set of skills, then an AI can help you enhance them. But if you don't have those core set of skills, then all you ever produce is the average that comes out of one of these systems. And so, and finally, whether we have the energy, like the physical amount of electricity for all the promises that are being made, is a huge question. And I don't think the answer is yes yet.
Yeah, I've been on that. Just I think we need to be a bit careful with stuff in between this AI is going to take over the world and revolutionise everything, and where we are right now, which is technology. You know, it's not that good yet. It can't do most people's jobs. And I would, again, focus on what they said. Focus on the core skills and assume that you're going to be using AI as part of that. I think the really interesting thing is, I mean, obviously I'm in the tech business, so that's my world. When you talk to people like C-suite or my CEO, very bullish on AI. You think, you know, I'm kind of in that position. Yeah, I really want to drive AI distributing processes, rethinking how we run our staff around it. I go talk to my AI engineer, one called from Iran, who I say, well, what AI tools are you using to increase your software coding productivity? She said, oh, it's using Cursor rather. You know, I just stopped using it. It's not even makes my brain go. And I actually get there. I actually find myself getting worse in my class after a few days, and I just come back and do it manually again. And this is a person who's working on this day in, day out all the time. So I would just like to maybe put a bit of things going fast. I think flexibility is super valuable. The key probably thing is understand the technology, but let's also, you know, a lot of these new technologies, what is it, we overestimate some of it's what things are going to do, we completely underestimate the subtle things that it's going to start, and I think that's very much true.
Just a quick correction there, Tom.
last week, and it was really good.
So can I just add on?
Sure.
Thank you. But also, that was a result of actually that the clubs that we use has been refined by learning design professionals like 150 versions of the clubs. And we combine multiple ones together to try and get them into control to create behaviours that we like. There's no kind of algorithmic coding in it. We know this isn't an easy problem to fix. On the surface of it, you just need to do amazing. You switch on one of these voice models, have a chat to it, and it's like a human. Wow. You talk to it for like more than like 30 seconds or 1 minute, you realise you can't get out of conversation, it's not doing what you want it to do. And that's exciting for us, that gives us a problem to solve. It might be like I just said, solve those problems at a time. So there's the balance act actually important. Like, are we investing in this technology? Are we going to see that AI going to take over and do this stuff better in like 6 months' time? But yeah, it's hard. There's a lot of ones. This stuff doesn't do very well. And you still need to use it for the time being.
Yeah, ultimately I see AI as an efficiency tool, and it wasn't too long ago that most people were working 6-day weeks. Like, my kind of hope is that it brings in a cultural change to make, instead of people have less jobs, people working less and doing what they love more. So in terms of, I love to see this actually prompting governments to go to 4 or 3-day weeks, so people can spend more time with their children when they're growing up, or more time studying history and other things that they absolutely love, and doing things that people just love in general. So that's my vision. What I want to see from AI.
Money. If you go to my students say, oh, I'm really excited, I'm going to go to I can work 3 days a week. I'm like, excuse me, you're going to get paid 3 days a week. Then what are you going to live on? That bit kills me, sorry. I didn't mean to be angry at it. I think that picture's just tipping me over the edge. I want to get paid 5 days a week. I need to get paid 5 days a week.
There's some studies with the council, people working 4 days instead of 5, and they were more efficient working over, or doing the same efficiency levels 4 than 5. I'm sure with AI we can get that.
But they won't do the pay. They won't do the pay.
Well, we surely need people to be paid the same for working less hours.
Yeah, exactly.
And we all can do that.
Fingers crossed.
Right.
I just want to answer that later. Here to about critical thinking of the Conservative. I actually think the AI is really helpful for critical thinking. When I was young, we had law notes, and when I was doing English, you would go about King Lear, and it would tell you what to think. And that was and then you take that to the exam, where King Lear said this because nothing well. You can now interrogate that in real time and get the answer, and then challenge it and then get a different answer. And I actually think the thinking process can be a lot richer and more nuanced with the ability to interrogate AI when it comes to, say, English language texts, and then you'll come back into class with a much more interesting viewpoint.
Because actually, a lot of people say it takes away your ability to analyse and evaluate and then synthesise. But I think actually, when you think of, I know it's a lot of people don't have rooms, but when you think about rooms, most people start on a subject at the bottom of rooms, and what actually I'm using AI for, what a lot of people I work with is, we're taking students in at analysis. Like, it's not that they've kind of built up a skill set, but you're kind of taking away that whole, I'm regurgitating, and I'm learning, I'm explaining, I'm describing, and you're analysing, and then you're interrogating it. And that's what we're not teaching our students, the act of interrogating.
Okay, one final. Go to you. Do you have something to ask or say?
Just because you mentioned the cost of interrogating it, we're essentially talking about a digital common textbook, except once you make those AI interrogations, kind of just fade off into the ether, if that makes sense. You can't archiving what you've learned and looked at is really interesting to allow you to reflect on the future. But at the minute, there aren't really a lot of options for coming back to it in minutes. We know that learning is not always a process. Do you have any, or anyone who's not talking to you because you're running, does anyone have any advice on how to integrate in more long
quick time and then we really have to finish.
I'm not sure whether it's because we paid the $20 a month subscription, but every search, every prompt you do in ChatGPT, and every when I'm in the car driving and I'm having an hour and a half conversation about something crazy, it records all those and you can search back into them. So, and then you can archive them into folders. So what you can do, so around project, for example, I'll have a random conversation about, I don't know, Paleolithic, archaeological units in what is now the British Isles. We'll go on a long rambling conversation and it will put it'll save that right into memory. Then I can archive that into a folder for that project. And when I search through it, I can search for that specific conversation, but I can also I can say, remembering all the conversations we've had about Paleolithic, Mesolithic, and Neolithic people, what do you think is a common consensus of academics thinking about social structures with regard to the changes that happened when people arrived in the UK? And it will go back over our conversations and synthesize them. So the thing that you have to remember with AI, because I think we get fooled into thinking it's magic, when really it's just a really clever way of navigating information. So Google, at a certain point, a long time ago, for a short period of time, was quite radical, and then it became an advertising agency. And it just, I want to find out what leaf it is, and it just tells me 10 trees I can buy from the local, whatever. This is just another very clever way, a much more clever way of navigating information. And you can, now I would have to check whether the free version allows you to do that. No, so you can't. But DeepSeek might allow you, or one of the others might allow you.
The answer is to use tools already integrated into the AI.
So for me, this is one of the new digital skills. So when you come up with rural market information, create your own file, like can't paste that. Create your own notebook. Use notebook LLM for sort of search your own work. But make sure you keep the beginning to forest of information. Can't paste it, and then or say, can you just make me a quick report of what we've just done today? And then save that as a document, and then keep that as your.
I'm using Obsidian to make a map of the things that
Yeah,
I'm interested in, but it just feels like very slow compared to the speed of AI.
Okay, I'm going to get shortly now. Just a quick thank you to all our panelists. Thank you all for the questions. Thank you. We are going to come back after break, but I'm going to hand back to Janet.
Thank you all. Gosh, that was so long ago. All the social ground there. So I just want to firstly thank Jim for hosting that panel. We've now we've kind of come to the end of the main part of our conference now. But there is the option, we've got a coffee break that I'm going to have in a minute, but before you do that, I've just got a couple of things I'd like to talk to you about. And one of those is there's the option of carrying on this discussion after the break, because the panelists have very kindly offered to stay on because there's so many questions and so much stuff to talk about. So can you put your hand up if it's something you'd be interested in? Would you be interested in staying for a bit of conversation for half an hour or so afterwards? Okay, oh brilliant, okay.